Good evening, Dominica. You're right here on Q95 FM, right on Q, the big station. And I want to welcome you guys to The Other Side. Oh, yes, this is where we present views which are different from what you normally hear on a range of current event topics. So, without further ado, let all views contend as we dig deep and get to the other side. In studio with me, as you know, is Sam Raphael and Kenny Green. Hi, Kenneth. Kenny
Hi,
Green,
how are you
yes.
guys?
And of course, yours truly, Tanya, the regular girl, Tanya Dixon. Tonight, we're tackling the third part of our three-part series on CBI. We'll be focusing on the future of CBI. Yes? So get ready to dial that, that little phone you have in front of you if you have questions of where CBI is going. That's in another, well, a little later on in the show. But for now, we're going to start, I guess I'll start asking Kenny some questions. But I think he wants to tackle something first. Are you going to go there with us now, Kenny?
Well, actually, I want to pay tribute to a couple of people who have passed on this past week.
That's
One,
nice.
sadly, that I found out about today.
Ooh.
The first is someone, who's been a regular in Dominican business life and, the basic, the circles of the entrepreneur community, and that is Parry Bellet.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to extend condolences to his family and to his friends. Parry from the DAIC, it's unfortunate that we've lost actually the two most regular attendees to the DIC, the Chamber of Commerce, that is Norman Rule and Parry Bellet, two stalwarts, two giants in their own way. Um, so again, I want to extend condolences to them and may their souls rest in peace. And the other is someone in the UK, no less significant, Dr. Violet Cuffey, who unfortunately was discovered as having passed recently, and she, as a diaspora located Dominican, the sister of Father Cuffey, those of us who know Father Cuffey, um, she, as a diasporan, has played a very important role in keeping connected to Dominica and to furthering the cause of Dominica, especially in the communities in the UK. And she'll be missed. A very significant loss for Dominica. So just wanted to make record of that before we started.
Mm-hmm.
Kenny, if I may jump in there, and I like to echo your sentiments with both Norman and Norman and
Parry.
Parry, and they were both involved in the Hotel and Tourism Association when I was president of the association, and I also know Violet rather well from her work at the Aid Bank. And I would also like to extend condolences to the extended families. I were able to call some of the family members. It's really a sad time because we've lost so many people, but this is the last program in the year, and maybe we can just reflect a little because we've lost some other people over the course of the year too that
Yes, yeah, long.
played significant roles in nation building. Certainly, we would go back and think Para Revere, who recently passed. He was certainly someone that made a major contribution in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and ever since, with his progressive background and his ability to articulate and to raise the consciousness of the people, and he did help raise the consciousness of the people of this island. So I'd like to pay tribute to Jenny and his extended family, and then also to the father of the nation of Dominica, Patrick John. He passed earlier this year
Yeah.
also, and fortunately, in many of these cases, in PJ's case, and a number of them, I was able to visit with them before, and I was happy to spend some time with Desiree. So Desiree and Nairi and Aisha, and PJ has some other kids, but I know the ones with Desiree, fairly well, and Des, and so I just like to extend from our program, condolences and respect for these people that made a significant contribution in the development of Dominica.
Yeah. Thank you for that, guys. So where are we going to dive in today? Are we going to dive
Yeah,
straight into the future, or would you like to tackle that question that still looms. It's just over us.
Well, we'll tackle it. I think we'll tackle it. We were supposed to have had an international guest on today. Unfortunately, he couldn't come on. He will be on a future show. It would have been very significant and would have been very exciting, but it will happen. With regards to what you were kind of alluding to, I know you've asked it in multiple shows. You basically hinted at it, and
So what's the
and
question? I don't know the
the,
question.
Where the
the,
money?
the
That's the question.
question the question that Tanya has been alluding
That's the one. That's how I was saying it now. Where the money?
where the money about the missing billions. And we're in a strange time in history, a very significant time, but a strange time. And I want to start as a precursor by talking about how communication has changed, communication and the interpretation of communication. Um, and actually, you can dovetail it even to significant events. And my significant marker was the origin of Trump, President Trump, in the political scene in the United States. Um, and because there was an event that happened that signaled the disruption of communication, which will dovetail into what we're going to speak about right now. And that is, I don't know if you remember it, that President Trump actually came to the fore and was galvanized by his backing of what was the birther allegation back then, where there was a allegation that President Obama was not born in the United States and indeed was a Muslim. Now, the first part is a significant allegation because it would have basically meant that his presidency was not legal. The second was just based on the time, you can call it uh, uh, based around prejudice, but also there was also a large demonization of Muslims at the time based on the Gulf War and, of course, 9/11. And the reason I mention this is because, after about 3 or 4 years of this, and President Trump, who was then, a private billionaire, so to speak, basically putting his weight behind that allegation, President Obama produced the long form of his birth certificate. And do you know what happened, Tanya?
What? Tell me.
Well, not much. The irony of all of this is that 45% of Republicans and 25% of independents, even after he released his long form birth certificate, thought that he wasn't born in the United States. So what it did is that it has signaled a trend where accusations and allegations are made. And there's an old saying that a, a, a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth can get out of bed. And so, therefore, what has happened is that communication strategies have changed. In many cases, some have chosen to take a very combative and proactive stance and to push back, and others have simply not, because the viral nature of communications is such now that conspiracy theories and allegations can embed themselves before you even can strategize about how you're going to respond to something, which ultimately, whilst it may not be true, you actually have literally no chance of rebutting. And so that has changed things on the head. And even this week, we got reminded of that. And I'll give you an example of something absurd. And I'm not talking about conspiracy theories with vaccination, etc., but of a far right allegation about Emmanuel Macron's, the president of France's wife, which she's had to actually go into the public to rebut the fact that that there's been noises that she was born a man. I mean, we're talking on a serious nature on a radio show, but this has actually become part of the political speech of France. Mm-hmm. And again, how do you rebut these things? So I'm going to come now to this $1 billion question, because it's interesting to me, because I saw when it started. I was actually watching Parliament when the presentation happened. I can't remember. I was actually in an airport somewhere and I was watching it on my phone. and I saw the presentation, which was then the budget rebuttal by the opposition. And then it carried on into what was the pre-election leading into 2019, the December 2019 campaign. So it became part of the political rhetoric, and it was pretty exciting. I mean, there was a lot of talk. It was, you know, both good natured, but at the same time extremely serious. You know, Otilajala uncle. You know, that kind of vernacular, that kind of language, and I can see Sam smiling. Um, but there are three reasons. I'm going to outline them quickly because I want for us to go on with the show. There are three reasons why it has not caught on, apart from a segment where you could almost say it's a local conspiracy theory, because it hasn't caught on with any other segment, no international body, none of the bilateral partners who would need to be able to be part of this for it to have any credibility. But I'll give the three reasons right away. The first, um, in the lead up to the elections and, you know, post the budget, when this was now becoming part of the rhetoric in the public domain, there were calls for the then financial secretary to step up and to say something as the top public servant in the Ministry of Finance, basically the person who had oversight over the nation's financings, to speak on this allegation. Um, the then financial secretary said nothing. She didn't comment at all. She said nothing. And about 3 or 4 months after the elections in early 2020, she retired, and she was immediately snapped up by the IMF to join the executive officer executive director's office in Washington. And that has a credibility issue here, because, you know, there you are basically intimating that the financial secretary will have known facts about malfeasance and misappropriation. And there is, sorry, Sam, you want to say something?
Not known facts, but have the oversight responsibility. This
Correct,
is her fiduciary duty. And
correct,
she was the one that was responsible for the resources of the state. So this is, I think you need to clearly state that. And
correct.
for her to be snapped up by the IMF means that these guys are sleeping, they are insane. How would you hire someone coming from an environment where there's any sense of credibility that even $1 is missing from the treasury, much worse for $1 billion? It just makes no sense. But carry on, Kenny.
Yeah, and I'll come to that also again in the third part of this. So there's a huge credibility gap here, and in most conspiracy theories, what tends to happen is that when uh, any other party fails to join in on it, they're usually discredited. And so to discredit the then financial secretary would be very difficult, because she has had a long history. I mean, she was the one who was there when we had our first the IMF structural adjustment program that Dominica entered. And quite frankly, Tanya, Dominica became very early on a poster child for a successful implementation of the structural adjustment program, something that has been stated. So in terms of the connectivity, it would have needed for an international organization like the IMF to essentially buy into the fact that she was so too tainted by her relationship with this so-called misappropriation, because she had been, up until that point, the financial secretary for, I believe, 19 years, since 2001, 2002. So that's the first one. There's a huge credibility gap. The second issue is quite current, actually, and quite interesting. Now, I've agreed in the past with the opposition on the fact that the Director of Audit's report was often lagging behind the current government finances, because typically the audit is done in the year after the accounts are revealed and discussed in the budget. And that technically has put the opposition at a disadvantage when they're looking to discuss and to review the audit of the accounts. Well, luckily, the new director of audit has brought this more up to current, and we're actually in 2021, we are now discussing the audit of 2019, which is pretty good. And for reference, it's not uncommon in the Eastern Caribbean. There should be no excuses for it, but for example, a nation like St. Vincent's, their audit is at, I think, in 2013 right now, and we're in 2021. So it is quite common in developing countries, especially in the Caribbean. However, that should be no excuse, and the opposition's cry was a good one, that they need to have a more balanced template to be able to work with. Well, we're in 2019 with the audit. And why is 2019 significant? Because 2019 was the year in which Otila Jala Uncle started. So the significance of this is that the director of audit has the responsibility for revealing, making notes about any misappropriation or malfeasance that have been noticed. And what is significant in the last audit report is that there's nothing. It's not about what was said, it's what was not said. There's no mention of anything with regards to misappropriation with CBI funds. The CBI funds that were audited from that year were just basically mentioned as line items, as every other audit has been done, with no significant mention. And given that the audit report has been discussed in the public domain, I find it very surprising that no one would notice that the audit report and the director of audit has basically blanked this claim. So apart from adding probably the IMF and the former FS to the list of conspirators to this whole thing, we now have to add the director of audit. And so there it becomes more and more fanciful, because at the end of the day, there is little or no weight when you do not have these significant guardians of our democracy, of our finances, basically stating anything. The third one is actually all of them combined, but into a greater point. This is not the world of 30 or 40 years ago. We are seriously connected into the global financial system, and the level of oversight that happens on this government and all governments in the region who are part of this system is serious. The IMF, I know, have had people here stationed for as long as 3 years, sitting in and working in the Ministry of Finance. So there's not much that is a surprise to them, because they want to validate our data. And all of these organizations, the EU have a local office, and yes, they have a local NAO, but they have their people coming in. The World Bank has a local office. And the truth is, Tanya and Sam, is that there's nothing that can be hidden. On top of that, I believe that there's a real concern that we seem to put out there to people, that our public servants at the top level are somehow simply easily bent over in the wind to any whim and fancy of the political directorate to be able to basically do as they say. And that's not so, because as we've seen, these people who are operating at the highest level have got serious credibility at an even higher level than our island level. And that is significant to us. The truth is that the reason we are speaking about this, because as I said earlier, it's very, very difficult for a government or any serious body to step forward and start talking about something that is unsubstantiated. But the reason that I think it's important that we bring it up here is because it will take one person to feel that they have a moral high ground because this is the truth, to do something extremely stupid. And that can happen at any moment. And I get the sense that there are people who feel that this is the truth simply because someone that they believe in may have stated it. And we have a very oral culture. People say stuff and then they walk away from it. I mean, we've seen it happen. We had the case in the United States with the Stop the Steal campaign that former President Trump was behind, and that led to January 6th. And what happens is that everyone then pulls back and disavows themselves and said, well, I didn't do it. I didn't tell them to do this. But the fact is, there is nothing there. There is, however, a serious discussion that can happen about how the existing funds are being used. And that's a discussion that's actually a good one, because it's a discussion that can have political weight if you can put a counter to how it's being used now by the current government to state how you could use it better. But that's not what's happening. What's been happening is that basically an allegation is being made that money is being stolen wholesale, and that people like Sam and myself are part of a cabal who are part of it and are somehow lingering here and protecting it.
So, Kenny,
And I
I'd
think,
like to jump in, if I may, and just touch on 2 points. One, adding to what you said, I totally agree with what you said. But shortly after the 2019 OT La Jala declaration, which apparently was a last minute, thing in Parliament, and it caught like a calypso, and since then it just took off from there, and it became a good tagline for the opposition to run into the campaign with. But a couple things. One, the when the opposition leader even got the assumptions, because anytime you come up with things with numbers, you either have to have hard numbers, hard basis, or you make assumptions, and assumptions are the mathematics you use to figure out to do your calculation.
Mhm.
And I did point it out right in this very station that the assumption of the just the 1.4, the assumptions were wrong, in that he had the wrong figures to begin with, for how much was was received for the government part of the real estate, on average. That was quite inflated, and some of the other figures were wrong. So even on that basis, if you were to just take the simple math that is used, which really is not rational, because you can't just pull top line figures and make those assumptions. But even if that were the case, the assumptions were wrong. And the fifth thing is, remember, after that happened, the prime minister did make an attempt to clarify, and he did state, look all around you. That's where the money's gone. And that kind of went
but,
sideways, and much
It
wasn't,
went left.
it
but
went
Sam,
left, much was made of that. But Kenny, it is amazing. 2016, 2015, you see Tropical Storm Erica. 2016, 2017, you see construction start on housing, a number of things. And 2019, you never ask, where did the money come from to build these things? Obviously, they weren't mushroom that came from nowhere. And I think this is what the prime minister was alluding to, that there was an agreement to develop housing that was part of the CBI program, and you have to account for a lot of the resources going into these developments. And we've seen a number of these developments. Yeah, so my thing is the suggestion that there is money in an offshore account somewhere, or some account somewhere, and to convince Dominicans, I think that is just so sad. I think,
but Sam,
that,
I
Can
think
I say something, Kenny? Sam, my thing is, yes, we can see things everywhere and all around us.
Mhm.
And I think it's clear that Dominicans are not doubting that. We can see
So
things.
you concede that that money is going into those things.
Yes, but I think it is still the right of the Dominican to know how how much is being allocated. Exactly what Kenny was speaking about. That there can be a deeper discussion about the allocation of funds. All right. And
well,
you know
yeah.
what that brings me to, Kenny?
Hmm.
What you said. You wrote an article on IMI,
Hmm.
right? And you had this, and when he had that I was like, wow. You said trust can only be gained with socializing or business win-win modules, and this is hard to achieve when there isn't humility or willingness to share. Now, you were speaking about that in terms of the success of CBI, how it can work in terms of the local agents and developers. But when I read that, it also made me think about the success of the program in terms of the confidence of the public in the program. Humility is needed, sharing is needed.
Okay, Tanya,
For those two,
I'm not going to argue that point with you because
yes,
I don't think that I just wouldn't argue against that.
yes,
If people are calling for more, whatever it is, they have a right to do so. But I don't think you have a right to state that money is missing.
Correct,
agreed.
correct.
No, you need
And that is a
facts.
challenge.
We need
So
facts.
if the question was, how do you account for this obvious housing that we see going
Agreed.
on in Bellevue, and I could see, okay, a business person can't argue with that because I audit my own business. If you have a business that you don't audit, then you're in
Sam, I
trouble.
agree. We
I,
can't
I
make
can,
wild
I,
statements.
So that is
We
my
shouldn't be
point.
making wild
At least
statements.
we concede that.
But then we need to ask: is the information available to actually even
well, well,
assess?
that's a very good point, Tanya. I want to come in on this because I started the way I did for a reason. First of all, let's make a disclaimer. I know Sam will appreciate what I'm about to say. There's nothing that we are saying on this show that is meant to try to sway people's political mindsets or what they believe and what they support. I want this to be 100% clear. Okay, I have zero interest in trying to come into some kind of mind-bending business. It does not work anyway. It will not work. And I'll tell you why it didn't work. I mentioned it before. You had over 13 million people in the United States faced with the physical birth certificate of the current president then of the United
We
States.
still didn't believe.
And they did not believe because perception is reality.
Maybe
Half
because
of Florida don't
maybe
believe COVID is
because
real.
maybe he took too long to address the situation.
No, the
It's just
issue.
like that, if the myth is there and it's just there seeping in, like those big cuts you have there, like a big bobo, a big sore, you're not dealing with it.
It's not about that, Tanya. It's in the new norm for communication is that it is about perception, and perception becomes viral.
Mm-hmm.
And
Perception
in
becomes
the
fact.
perception case, people believed Trump more than they believed Obama. And for those people who like Obama will find that hard to believe because they'll say Obama is more truthful than Trump. But that's the be all and end all. And in fact, in 2016, when Trump became president, he was forced to admit that Barack Obama was born in America. And guess what? It still did not change the perceptions of those people because they had already gone down that line. They had gone down. And
But it's still not an excuse for things to be addressed.
So Tanya, I think we all concede we're private business people, right? Even though when you speak, trying to bring the other side, the assumption is that we're the spokesman of the government, spokespeople. We're not. Kenya and I are not representing the state. We're not representing the Labour Party. We're business people just trying to have a discussion with the folks here, right?
Right.
So I in all fairness, as he's saying, that's all we're suggesting, right? But people tend to gravitate towards what they want to believe. Okay.
Yep.
So it now fulfills a narrative that they want. They want to believe, and there's nothing you can say about it that will take it, because that is what they. If people who don't like people who don't like me, if you say you know who I am, most Dominicans know who I am.
Yes.
If they said, "Boy, Sam Raphael went and stole a bread from Suki," you know what I'm saying?
You like Bacchanal.
If they say Sam Raphael stole Suki bread, right, and piss off Suki.
Mm-hmm.
People who don't like Sam Raphael, yes, they don't care what it is, because that is what they want to believe. And there is a large segment in our political alignment, in our political system, the US system, that is and they will forever gravitate towards what they want to, and that's the bottom.
One second, Kenny. 1 second.
But you
1 second.
And I didn't steal Suki bread.
I know. It surely wasn't you. 1 second. Why can't we change the conversation? Because I'm so tired of of saying and repeating, well, people just like perception.
Well, okay,
Because
Tanya.
you did state, Kenny, that
Mhm.
the need to have deeper conversation. We're talking about the future CBI. Let's talk
Yes,
about that in the future then. Do we need
yes.
to have deeper conversations about
Well,
allocation of money?
well, here's the thing, Tanya, and that's very important. We have an oral culture. We've said this before on this show. The Director of Audit report is 118 to 120 pages. What people do is they remove themselves from the responsibility of having to read this, and they give it to someone that they feel they trust to interpret that data for them and to come to them and tell them what's true and not true,
Agree.
what's not true. Now, that's a dangerous thing to do for anyone who wants to get information, but that is the norm in our society. So when you say let's have a different conversation, people who look at me, those people who know me and trust me, will say, you know, he has a point. And at worst, what they will do is go and read the Director of Audit report. They'll Google about the former FS and when she retired, etc., and see if that story corroborates. And they'll look at the data and say, okay, so there's nothing in there. And on top of that, we've had a recent IMF report. And the IMF report that came out recently is very, very instructive because it's pretty much the first time where it's actually acknowledged all of the work being done by CBI. It actually talks about the public sector investment program, and it talks about the proposed effect on GDP based on these works coming to the fore. So there you have the IMF basically giving credence and authenticity, and that's not something that you can challenge. It's there, it's in black and white, and they've had to authenticate that data because they do visit the island regularly, because they don't trust governments to just tell them that what they're doing with whatever drawdowns that they're getting from the SDRs, or whether the data that they're presenting is just kosher. They are going to authenticate that data. So the conversations have to start with a level of personal responsibility. People have to actually go and read. And if you don't read and you expect someone to translate data for you, at least be in at least be able to go and look back at the data and challenge it yourselves. So that's important. So I think we may need to go to a break so that we can actually go and have a discussion about what's next, what's going to happen next, in the scene globally.
Yeah, let's go to a quick break and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to The Other Side. In studio, Tanya Dixon, Sam Raphael, and Kenneth Green. We're talking about the future of CBI tonight on our three-part series. This is a third part, so no more CBI next week. Thank God. I'm getting tired. I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, all of us, all of us.
We're not hearing Kenny. Kenny, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, great. So we're jumping into the future of CBI. And I thought we already jumped into that with the last question I came up with there. I am not sure if I get you all to agree that we need to have some more transparency, to help the credibility, to increase the confidence. And I feel that is something that should be worked on for the CBI program to help with the success of the program. I'm not talking about credibility for clients and investors. I think it's important to increase the confidence of the locals for this program to be successful.
Well, I'm not going to sit in the studio and argue against people asking for more information if that's what you're
No, but
asking
I'm not
for.
asking for more
So,
information. I'm
so
just
I would
asking
never, people
you.
have a right
I'm
to
asking
ask
you,
their government
how
for
are we
more
going?
information.
How are
They
we
have a
going?
right to ask that.
Yes, I agree, but
But you don't
how?
have a right to pre-state the conclusion that billions are missing
But
when you
Sam, we
haven't
off of
asked for
that
them. Oh,
already.
I just want to be
Yeah,
clear.
yeah,
We off of
So
that already.
we've discredited the billions of missing.
No, well,
I'm asking you.
we've said that while statements may have been made, right? We need facts to make these types of statements. You guys, this is what
So
you guys said.
I'm asking, do
And
you
I
agree
agree.
then
No,
as everyday
I
girl?
agree that if we have to make statements like that, we must have facts.
So that was inappropriate to make that statement.
Look how you trying to put me
So
in.
so okay.
But you
So
trying to commit.
you
Anyways,
guys have your own
anyways,
dynamic. You guys have your
I
own
am just
dynamic.
saying, Kenny, I
You
was
see, Kenny,
telling
she's not being fair, you know. Okay, go
Kenny,
ahead,
I
go
was
ahead.
telling Sam, I looked at the audit report, right? And you can correct me if I'm wrong. You know, I'm just a regular girl. I read because you all told me I need to read more
I understand.
and understand. You see, you bring a new one now and understand. So I'm hoping you will help me understand because I looked at the audit report. I looked at total revenue for CBI. I looked at expenditure. I didn't get any breakdown of where the CBI expenditure was, except for, excuse me, government projects. Right? There was a section with government projects, and that was broken down. And I like numbers. I add up the numbers, but that amount didn't add up to the amount of revenue. So I don't know if I'm reading it wrong.
I think Tanya, your points are excellent, and at the same time, it means that this is the dangerous ground where someone gets to interpret that data for you, and if the wrong person interprets the data for you, then you get to be in trouble. Um, it is not a simple case of just adding up numbers on one side and it equaling on the other. You having a bit of an attack in there.
Tell the whole world.
Well, I can see
It's
you.
not TV, you know, it's radio. The whole world have to know having an attack.
But of course, we want to make sure that if you're being rescued, that you're being rescued appropriately. We have to make sure we're safe.
But you understood my question, though. It's
I
just
understand your question.
an average person like me now. You see, I've been sprayed with all kind of a thing inside.
Sam is protecting Kina.
Perceptions now. People say that girl have COVID.
No,
no, but
but Tanya, you're 100% correct. It's not a simple case of just having to watch line items on one side of the
then where we get any information from?
And well, you see, part of that has to be a discussion as well. You're right. But the thing about it is this, and that's the problem. When that comes from the government side, then you get a pushback based on the perceptions again. So there has to be some form of, I would say, advisory that goes forward deeper than probably what happens even from the audit report level to speak about the ongoing works year by year of the CBI in a way that is easily decipherable for people. Now, it gets done, don't get me wrong, it gets done, but I don't think it's commonly accepted by everyone. So someone will look at Bellevue Chopin, they will look at the hotels, and even then there's perception gaps. So you know the whole education that we went through on the real estate. I've had multiple people come up to me to tell me they thought that the government used to give money to people like Sam, and then they would go and develop the hotels, etc. So if we manage to help people understand that it is actually Sam and Alec and Mohammed at Range and Gregor who's actually raising the finance, and then government gets a portion of that money to be able to utilize for its own development needs, whilst the rest is used for the developer to build the hotels. Then, if that's understood, then we've made some progress. But truth be told, it's not going to be a straight exercise of you watching a piece of paper and understanding right away how much money is being spent on X or Y. It just doesn't work like that. Sam, I don't know if you want to add on this.
Yeah, well, it speaks to Kenny and Tanya. You asked some direct questions, and even though you don't want to directly answer my question that I ask
If it's
on whether
appropriate or
it's
not.
appropriate to ask
Well, you see,
that,
I
it's
don't
clearly
know.
not.
No,
But you
but
don't
I
want
don't
to. You
know
dance
how the
around that.
individual
I
found their
won't. I won't
information.
treat you the same way. I'll be more direct than that. I think it
Ooh,
speaks to your questions. I think, and any other question with respect to finances are legitimate to ask, right? And we have structures in government
right.
that should be functioning, but it speaks to the dysfunction of our partisan system, how far we've gone. We have a public accounts committee,
Mm-hmm.
which is chaired by the opposition leader. We have a parliament, which is where these things are to be asked in a manner in which you abide by the rules of parliament.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
But we've seen dysfunction in the parliament,
Mm-hmm.
and the Public Accounts Committee has not been functioning. And so there you have it. And absent those things, the opposition has been content to throw out the bomb of Oti l'argent là, 4 billion. Next thing it'll be 10 billion missing, next thing or whatever. Because there's a gullible audience, sufficient consensus among opposition members who do not represent the majority of the government. And for them, it provides cover for them. It's something bad about the government. So they will cling to that without really trying to find some ground to find some resolution to that. So I don't want to blame one side or the other. I just think it speaks to the dysfunction. And as a country, as a people, we need to try to find ways where we can talk to each other, the opposition and the government, to try to find solutions for that. And that's my thing. I don't have any problems with any question that the opposition would ask the government. I think the government should answer any question they ask as thoroughly as much as possible. Certainly, some things are confidential, so you cannot be blabbing out all kinds of details. But I would like us, come 2022, hopefully the government and the opposition could move towards where there's a more functioning government with both opposition and government. And I think that would then be able to answer a lot of these questions and be able to cover it. But as long as it's one side flying off the handle and the other side then reacting in to the opposite way, retracting, I think then you're going to have these situations. So I have no difficulty with your question. There's Parliament and the Public Accounts Committee, which is what the founders of this country, I think they set these things up so that these questions could be answered,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where they need to be asked. And you shouldn't use these bodies to make irresponsible statements, and then you go off left field, and then we end up in a situation where there's a stalemate, where there's a percentage of the people that believe it and they don't make up a majority. So the rest of us in the majority really ignoring them because we think they're crazy and they think we're a bunch of thieves, and that's just how it is.
And that's a good explanation. But Tanya, nearly all of the information is in there somewhere. The budget documents are, to be honest, tedious. They're huge, and I've had the issue in the past with the DIC, etc., to just say, can you give us a budget summary? Now, often we do get from the Ministry of Finance a budget summary, which kind of highlights the different things. But a lot of what is supposed to function as information happens in the budget debate, because they're the questions asked, as Sam asked, mentioned, and then the Prime Minister is compelled to answer with the data. And if you go through the budget debate and you look at the videos and you actually read some of the budget addresses, and I can send you a couple of them, you'll see the data. They'll give you breakdowns of data specifically based on questions that were asked. I think that we also need to continually educate our populace. And that means, as I said earlier, it's not to propagandize people, but to give them the tools to be better informed. You can have tools and be better informed and still disagree with what we say, but at least do so from a position of information.
We really need to get Kenny if you're going to go into the future of CBI, because
Yes.
we're going to need to take some calls, and then we have an
Yeah,
address
we
by the
basically have like
directions.
less than 10 minutes before we
Okay,
take
so
calls.
I'll kind of go into something that I think is very critical for the way forward. The first thing, I mean, I want to to point out, by the way, that Range have just announced a new development in Grenada. They just signed off on an intercontinental hotel for Grenada, which, considering they're still building the Six Senses, is pretty significant. So they're jumping ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that's going to look to happen in the next year is that there's going to be new types of projects outside of the tourism market. And I know you've asked about that, Tanya.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is that in the future, some of the people in the industry have asked for developers to more due diligence to be done on developers so that they're better capitalized. And what that means, basically, in ordinary speak, is that developers need to have their money when they're coming with their proposals to be able to get permission to raise funds via CBI. Because as we explained before, you can't simply do your development work using CBI money. And what does that mean? 99% of the projects in the Eastern Caribbean are tourism-based hotels. From my knowledge, I mean, you have I believe in Antigua, there's 2 projects which are non-tourism. I think the UE and another housing project. And then you had in Grenada an attempted an agriculture project, which turned out to be a disaster, which was the tilapia fish farm.
Mm.
But the need is going to be for people to step forward for gaps in the private sector to be filled. So I believe the head of the unit spoke about a prospective water development. I believe there may be avenues for agriculture, etc. But people have to come forward with their proposals, and they have to have their capital. I think that's it. It almost blows people's mind because they think that the developers are getting the capital from the government or the program. No, you have to come with your capital and then show how you're going to be able to utilize your capital and the capital from the CBI to be able to make a success out of the development. And that's a very difficult thing. So the future really is going to center around diversifying, I think. I think all of the programs are now looking to diversify simply because they've got so many hotels on the cards that they're looking now to diversify into other infrastructure, marinas, agriculture, possibly manufacturing. But where you do not have brands and where this is a development need driven by the private sector, they need to have their own capital. So that's the first. The second is that go ahead, Sam, sorry.
Yeah, and just to clarify, people need to bring proposals to the government, and that's how it works. I think people sit and complain, and I would ask them, have you presented a proposal to the government and it's been rejected? No. But they sit there. So
Sam,
people need
stop
to,
it.
no,
Of
no, no,
course they
honestly,
know that.
no, people don't. People need to understand that the only way we're going to get a diversified portfolio in the CBI is if you come forward with, the government can't put forward a
Agreed.
diversity. That's the
I
point.
think people are
So
aware of that.
no, not necessarily. I just think that people need to understand that the folks out there need to come to the government with your proposals, either for diversified types of businesses, or if you have an idea for a different model, bring it up to the
Yeah,
government for
I'm
discussion.
sure they know that, but they probably don't have the money.
To bring up a
Well, yes,
discussion.
well, that is the big deal. I mean, and trying
We
to,
have I sure probably a proposal, but do I have the money?
yeah.
Do I have the money? That's just
But you
I
have to
think
take
that's
the
a lot of
risk.
people's issue.
Yeah, you have to take
Yes,
the risk.
it's a big. Kenny just said it. It's a big risk.
Yeah.
But you can't come with your hands swinging, and that's
Of
a
course,
perception. But
agreed.
the perception has been that people go in there with their hands swinging, and the government say, "Here, take money, take the money," and that's
Well,
not the case. I just want to be clear, so
I
you
know,
understand
I
that.
understand.
Okay, thank you, Tanya.
But I'm sure people know that they can come to the government with their ideas, their proposals. But I can't go there with a proposal and I don't even have a plan for how I'm going to get the money.
Then are you
And
ready to
so,
get? Are you ready to get into business?
well, yeah, that's
So,
where you
so the
should work
other
hard
thing
on that.
the other thing that's it's looking to happen, and it started happening already, is RBIs versus CBIs. Now,
Okay.
the difference is that that with RBIs, the current CBI programs do not require the applicants to spend any time in the jurisdiction that they're applying for
What does
citizenship.
RBI stand for?
Residence by
Okay,
investment.
thank you.
So we have RBIs in, for example, the closest one that we've got is we've got one in Anguilla, which you spend 5 years in Anguilla. Well, you spend a minimum amount of time in Anguilla, usually 90 to 100 days. I think it's between 90 and 180 days a year. And after 5 years, you qualify for a British passport, providing, of course, you've invested a minimum amount in real estate on the island. Now, the difference with RBIs is that it's a totally different type of client. It's a totally different type of person. So the reason that this will become popular is because it it deals with one of the complaints that people have about CBI programs, which is that the average person on the ground is not seeing immediate benefit because they're not interacting with the money from the applicant. And that is important because it means that you get people who are living on the ground, consuming, participating in your society, and becoming contributors to the entire fabric of the society. So there's a number of RBIs that have come into play. Curacao has one, Anguilla has one, and in many jurisdictions where there are RBIs, what you tend to find is that there's a greater investment in the communities that people end up living in, because once you end up living in a place for a minimum amount of time, you have to shop, you have to
You pay
send your children to
taxes.
school, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
Just like you, Tanya, you're a contributor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Kenny, we at 6:51. I don't
Yes,
know
I
if
know
you
you
have
have to
any
go.
more contributions.
No,
So
let's go with
let's go into the calls. Yes,
yeah.
quickly. So people were opening up the lines. You can call 449-3095, 449-3096, or 449-3097. We also have 616-4257. We are focused on the future of CBI. We don't talk about where the money go. Okay? Please.
Come on, savage
Take
you.
this call.
Yeah.
Caller, you're live? We're barely hearing you. Maybe you need to give us a call back.
Is there a problem with the line?
Yes, I have a question here, but
Mhm.
I actually did tell the person that we did answer this last week, but they would like to have it asked again.
Yeah.
They're saying, gentlemen, good evening. Would you agree with the view held by many Dominicans that the CBI programs has become a cash cow for a selected few? Question number two, in light of fact that you two are the only ones found it necessary to start a program on Q95 to explain and defend the CBI program amongst other things, can you explain to us what are the topics you intend to cover and give us your views as to whether this responsibility to explain this to us should not be the responsibility of those voted into government, the representative meant to be accountable to us, the people?
Well, I will answer that last question. Yes, I do believe that the representatives need to speak to all the people all the time. But I would say Kenny and I chose to come up and to speak to the public on this. Why? If I was a banana farmer and bananas were being abused and the banana industry was being misrepresented, I wouldn't wait for the government or the BMC or anything else. I was a banana farmer. I would come and defend my industry. I'm in tourism.
Mhm.
If there was a situation where the public had anti-tourist sentiments and they were spreading what I thought was misinformation, am I going to sit and say, well, that's a DEIC job? That's the Ministry of Tourism. No, I'm going to get out there and defend. So I see it as the same thing. I'm involved in CBI. That's how I was able to develop the resort Jungle Bay. We provide jobs for a lot of people. I could see the benefits. I'm not going to wait until the government come into Q95. They use other mediums, but I think as responsible citizens, we need to talk to each other. And that's why I'm here. That's why Kenny is here. That's why Parry used to call this very station, even though you disagree with him. We need to talk to each other, and that's why we're doing this. Does that mean that we are doing it so the other people don't do it? No, that's why we invited Emmanuel Nanton, and he came in here
Yeah.
last week. So I think hopefully this answers that question.
Okay. Anything to add, Kenny? I think we have a call coming in.
Let the call come in and then I'll talk to you.
Caller, you're live. Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I just want to make the point that the record of the opposition in Parliament with respect to the CBI questions that have been asked in the public, that record remains unchallenged in Parliament. What we see happening in Parliament, Tanya, is an effort by the government side to make sure that they shut down the opposition, that the opposition do not get the chance, the opportunity to ask the pertinent questions. The last budget response from the leader of the opposition is a perfect example of that, when unprecedentedly armed policemen were directed into the parliament to prevent the leader of the opposition from responding to the budget address. In his response, we will have heard all the questions and the concerns that we have about CBI at parliamentary level. And interestingly enough, Mr. Skerritt himself admitted that had he placed the entire how many billion dollars into the consolidated fund, the amount in the consolidated fund would be 2.2 billion and not 1 billion as he had indicated in his budget of the previous year. So these facts are there. They are unchallenged. These are the facts that we want to be addressed. We heard the gentleman talking about assumptions and correct numbers. Well, sir, please give us the correct assumptions and tell us the correct figures, because in the parliament, the opposition are basing their assumption and their figures based on government documents. For example, we have the whole question of the amount of certificates of naturalization, which was used to determine the amount of passports sold or the amount of money received for economic citizenship.
Caller, you have 30 seconds.
Yes, so we want them to produce don't just tell us their numbers are wrong. Produce for us the right numbers, because you are the agent. And by the way, just tell us how many economic citizens have each of you gentlemen facilitated over the years.
Thank you, caller. Thank you. That's
Kenny partner.
That's Kenny. That's Kenny partner.
The funny thing about this is that you're starting from the same point all over again.
Mm-hmm.
If you make an allegation, it is incumbent on you to actually prove what you're alleging is true. You can't make an allegation and ask the other person to disprove it. That's not how
Kenny, I understand what he's saying, though. He's saying, okay, you want me to give facts. You want me to not make these statements that are just off the top of my head and to guess. Then give me the information I need to be able to assess the situation, to build my confidence in the situation. I'm not getting the information I need.
But
that's what he's saying.
The information is in the audit report. The information is in the statements that are made. The information is even in the IMF report that has been put out recently.
Okay, so
that is data that is authenticated data.
Okay.
Are you going to say to the IMF that their data is wrong? Are you going to go to the director of audit and say that as a creature of constitution, she's not doing her job? And are you going to go to the IMF office in Washington and say that the former FS has been part of the largest financial malfeasance in the history of the Caribbean? I mean, you have to get real about these things. That's the problem. There's emotion behind some of these things. Sam, all of the developers have escrow accounts. They are all private-public arrangements between the developer and the government of Dominica. It's not just MMC who have an escrow. All of the developers have escrow accounts. They are not documents of public note. They're arrangements that are made between the developer and the government. And they're like every other escrow account in every other country. Boston had the big dig. They had a contract with the government. Halliburton, when they did their work overseas in Iraq, etc., had contracts with the US government. They are not even under the Freedom of Information Act public documents. And so those are things that, yes, you have to educate people on, but the data is there. And it's from those snippets of data that gives the country credibility when it deals with bilateral partners. Don't you find it odd, Tanya, that not the EU, not the CDB, not the ECCB, not the World Bank, not the IMF, no one is responding or resonating these allegations. Everything is just continuing as normal. The government is continuing to raise finance. The reports are being made. Audits are being done. You can't pause for those who are throwing stones from the side.
Yeah, I feel kind of hurt when you say that. Because I do find it strange, that we keep going with this whole myth. But like you said, all the other reports, it basically debunks that. It shows that everything is okay. I get that. But I don't think we should say we cannot pause to help people understand. I
Yes, I
think it's
agree.
beneficial to help the people understand.
But we're here trying to understand, Tanya. I am not an employee of the Ministry of Finance. Kenny is not
Well,
an
we need
employee of
somebody
the
like
Ministry
that.
of
I
Finance.
told Kenny
So,
that,
so, so, so,
Yep.
so, we don't have that.
we
We
want
only
somebody like
share what
that.
we only share the information we have, and I'm not going to go out there and put out any wrong information.
Agreed.
I know in terms of when the opposition leader, as I said, when he made his initial statement and he spoke of the assumptions of the real estate component, I immediately jumped on that because it made no sense. He attributed $50,000 to everyone that got a passport. You could be a member of it just didn't make any sense. And I said on this station, and I corrected it. Now there are different rate categories and different things. Those are the things that they need. If they're interested, they need to crunch the numbers and come up with that. But don't throw it on me. You're the ones making the allegation. Dig, find, but find more correct numbers than the ones you could, because I just saw what you put out and it didn't make sense. And so that's my perspective. So if like you said, the director of the leader of the opposition have some statutory grounds to get information. That's the way the Constitution is written. And so instead of complaining on the radio all the time, they need to put their smarts together and figure out, when you go into Parliament, I'm not going to go get kicked out this time. I'm going to find a way to avoid all of this and play by the rules and get the answers. But I don't think they want to do that. They rather go out there and make trouble and then get kicked out of Parliament. And you see they're kicking us out. And this is what we have, a comedy show happening in Dominic,
Sam,
unfortunately.
I
And the
want
public is so. I'm just putting it out there. Kenny, you may not agree with me, but I'm just
I don't want to go down that tack. I wouldn't go down that tack. What I wanted to answer,
Yeah, troublemaker.
Tanya asked a question about,
But it's true.
from a question that was asked earlier about what other topics. And yes, we intend to deal with a range of other topics, including banking. We have a pretty exciting show on banking, hopefully coming up, on relationships with bilateral partners like China and the US. Speaking also even to things like electoral reform. And you'll be surprised at some of the stuff that has happened already. So I see Sam is smiling.
Yes.
The truth is, and I want to get down to this again because it has been alluded to in the past. The oldest players in terms of the agents in the industry in Dominica have been doing this for over 27 years. And I don't mean me or Sam. Sam is close to that. But can you find people in Dominica who've been doing the same thing in business for over 20-something years and are not successful? Think about it. So,
time on that.
And they've not just been operating under this government. They've operated under all three governments under the citizenship program. And there's names, I won't mention them, but they've been agents who've been there and working across all of this. So this insinuation that somehow we are going to somehow fall flat on our faces if we don't come on this show, that's ridiculous.
Is that the insinuation? I think they're just insinuating that only one set making money and you are part of the set. I don't think it's that they're going to fall flat on your face.
I think you have to rewind. You have to rewind the tape a bit, Tanya. The thing is, if we don't come forward and speak, no one else will come because everyone is afraid of having stones thrown at them like it's being thrown at us. But if we don't come forward and do it, who will? And instead, it makes this a ripe ground for misinformation, because if no one comes forward and to talk about the facts, then you leave the room open for a lot of misinformation. And that's what a number of people prefer, and they're very angry. Some people are very angry because we've invaded their safe space.
That's what we've
Yeah.
been seeing up to this
Yeah.
point.
I
That's what
can
we've been seeing.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm
And
glad you keep
that's
saying
all.
that. We need to come forward with the information. Somebody actually have a question for you too, Sam. I think you'd answer it quickly. They asked, "Do you believe in God?" Let me tell you, I just had to ask that question. The person
What
asks, "Do
kind
you
of
believe
question?
in God?"
Of course, yes, I do, but I shouldn't have to answer that.
Well, I don't know. Yeah,
That's a
we open up the lines.
strange
Let's take
question.
the call on the line. Caller, you're live. Good evening.
You believe in God, you're on the other side, you're on the devil side. You believe on the devil.
Well, you see, that's the thing, We're trying to have civilized conversation. And let me tell you,
No, I think the
I
caller was
don't,
being humorous, I
you think
presume.
so? I
Yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah.
like to cut off
No,
callers,
let the caller make
Are
a
you
point.
still there? Is he still there? Hello?
That's funny.
No. I don't like to, yeah, I don't like to cut off my callers. Caller, are you live?
I am there. I am there.
Okay, great. Good
And
evening.
well, we're still in the Christmas season, so I'm well in order to wish you all a Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Same to you.
Compliments of season to you and yours.
Oh well, and all the very best for the new year. A lot of people say they don't know exactly whether they're going to be able to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the new year. But God will, that we say God will provide. All
Mhm,
right, so for hard work and sweat,
mhm.
Yep.
God will provide. But I mean, all of us, I'm sure, have been listening to Parliament for, you know, on a very regular basis. Okay,
Yes, we're
and
listening.
and questions that are posed to the government, they choose to answer maybe questions that would not really be of any concern, that Dominicans may not even want to listen to the answer to that simple question. But when it comes to the hard questions, like right, like like finance, the state of the treasury, and everything like that. In other words, they just dump those questions, and as one of the callers said a while ago, questions, relevant questions that were posed in Parliament. Rather than answering the questions, they brought in the military to shut up the government, to the opposition. They brought in the military to prevent the opposition from asking those relevant questions. And that is a dictatorship. I'm not sure, I don't know how you look at it, but that is wrong dictatorship. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Wow.
It'll be interesting to find out what was asked around there. To be honest, I don't have any
It was no
recollection of
question. It was a statement. You have to expect that too. Everybody gonna call and ask questions. I just want to tell you how I feel.
No,
Hey,
no, no, no.
Tanya,
I
do
was
you,
not
do you
talking
believe
about
in
that.
God, Tanya? I'm beginning to wonder.
I'm being
No, no, no. I was not talking about that. I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about the case in Parliament about what was asked at the time
Oh.
that created that whole incident. The truth is, there's a Hansard, and the Hansard records basically all the events of Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
I go back sometimes periodically to look at the budget debates. I look on video. Obviously, it's great to be able to see the debate, but it's easier for me to actually find the references and see the questions. To me, that's better. That's better to find out what
We have
happened.
another call coming in.
Mhm.
Caller, good evening. You're live.
Yes, good evening. I just want to make reference to a point made by Sam. He said that the Public Accounts Committee is not functioning. Now, for the Public Accounts Committee to function, it needs appropriate data. And a repeated request from the Public Accounts Committee for relevant data has been refused. The data has not been supplied. That is why it's not functional. And Sam, you should say so because you know that. That is why the Public Accounts Committee is not functional. It is not being supplied with the data requested. So be honest with the people, doctor.
Well,
Thank you,
my,
caller.
my, my friend, I will respond to you. And the difference between what you said and what I said is not functional. You give a prescription as to why I can't give a prescription. I think I would be more balanced than just what you said. But I think we can both agree that it should be functioning better than it is right now.
Okay. We have another call coming in. Let's take that one. Good evening. You're live on the other side.
Hi, good evening to you, Tanya. Good
Hi.
evening to your rest of your family in the studio. So I have a question I want to ask Sam. Sam, you listening to me?
I sure am.
Okay. So Sam, in 2009, I remember clearly that you run as an independent candidate in the City 7 constituency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So and it was Roosevelt Kerry was the leader of the Labour Party. Or Labour Party was still in power back then.
Correct.
Was there a specific reason why you chose to run against Roosevelt Kerry at that time? I'm going to stay on the line, and then I have a question for you. Just now, Tanya asked you if you believe in God, and you said, yes, Sam, you know, and I know that what the answer you gave is untrue, Sam. You need to be more truthful, Sam.
So I don't
Okay?
believe in
I'm
God?
listening to- No, you don't, Sam. Sam, I'm
Okay.
not even going to go down your road with you on radio. I know everything, Sam.
So you read my
So I need
mind
to
and you
answer
know
the
I don't
question.
believe
I
in
need to
God.
answer
Okay,
the
my
Okay,
friend.
so
question.
caller, besides that
I
first
need to answer the
question, do you
question
have
with
another
regards
question,
to
caller? Besides the first one?
yeah. I need him to answer the question with regard to why he chose to run against
Roosevelt Scarrett.
Roosevelt Kerry Labour Party. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't choose to run against Roosevelt Scarrett. I chose to run as an independent candidate in the PD7 constituency. I thought at the time that I could offer something because I felt that there was a lot of gridlock in our system. And I did not prevail. I didn't do that badly as a candidate.
So,
So that's what happened.
okay. So
Okay.
first question to you, Sam.
Okay, last question, caller.
Had you been successful at that poll? Would you join the Labour Party? You consider on the Labour Party side, on the government side? That's what you're saying? Or
Okay.
you be an independent?
My friend,
Thank you, caller.
if I had intended to, I would have sought to run on the Labour Party side. I ran as an independent. What would have happened after that? I don't know. You're talking about more than a decade ago, so I guess we can move on.
Let's move to the line again. We have another call coming in. Good evening, caller. You're live.
We're almost open the line competition. I give out the first, second, and third.
Can you raise? I'm not hearing you, caller, properly. What are you saying, caller?
All you must open the line competition.
Mm.
Because I give all you first, second, and third, and all the consolation prizes for lying. Me mercy, Lebanon,
Thank you, caller. You see, we have to allow people to
Tanya, he
say.
gave you the first prize, you know.
But I don't hear the man. The man didn't call any names. He just said first, second, and third. And constellation.
Folks, I don't mean to make light of these things, but I find sometimes we get personal, and there shouldn't be any of that in public discussions. We're just having a public. Why all of this personal
Well,
attack?
I think
don't. It's
personal
kind of
because-
strange
well,
to
let me tell you why
me.
it's personal.
Mhm.
I think it's because, at the end of the day, some people feel like the operations of our country, of what all the things that are happening, it's affecting you personally. Okay?
So you want to
So
attack people personally
yes,
because
it
of
happen-
that?
But it happens.
Wow,
It happens.
okay, I don't
Some people are
share that.
better able at managing their emotions,
Mhm.
and let's keep it real. It's like what Kenny said. A lot of it is emotions. I am upset. I am angry. I'm going to call you. I'm going to tell you how I feel.
But if you're in a hole, Kenny, Tanya, and you want to get out, right?
Yeah.
How you get out is to try to pull people down in that hole with you.
Some people do that, and some people don't.
But I tell you, that doesn't work. And just, we're going into the year 2022. I think we need to try to be more positive in our thinking, in our outlook, and maybe try to be more focused on solutions. And oftentimes we lash out, but we don't really try to find solutions. And I think that's where we talk about the future, Kenny. Maybe we can look at what makes people successful and not successful. That's a big question, but
Guys,
throw that out there.
guys, I think we have to understand this. This show has been what, 3 shows, 4 shows?
4.
So far?
Yes. This
This
is
is
the
all
4th
4.
one.
If someone's being told, let's go back to the old example. We're being told that the President of the United States is not American, he's not born in the United States for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And for the first time, someone comes along and says, oh, yes, he is. And here's the proof. And here's what we think. Do you really expect them to just suddenly switch over to your form of thinking?
No, of course not.
No, and
Especially if they come on Fox News, which this is
yeah,
the Fox, this is the Fox
exactly.
News of the opposition.
I
Eh?
I think I think
Sam, oh
we have
my
to put it
God.
into perspective. People have been radicalized with a stream of information. The same guy, by the way, Sam, I think that was the same guy who called last time and asked if you'd ever declared bankruptcy. Um,
Yes, something like
so
that.
the guy knows a lot about you, your belief in God
Yes,
and bankruptcy
that
and
you're telling a
everything
lot
else.
of lies.
You know, but the thing about it is
I
that
don't even know
uh,
who this guy is. That's a sad part.
the thing about it is that people feel helpless because you're coming now with this information that is contradicting everything that they've been told. So yes, we're lying to them and we are basically invading their safe space and telling them stuff they've never heard before. But as I said, I think it is better people have information that they can go and check. You
Mhm.
know, I encourage people to go and fact check everything you hear us say.
Yeah, but
You
it's
know,
also when you give the information. The timing is it have to be right. Probably we need to be more forthcoming early on about this all this millions of dollars missing. It doesn't seem as though the issue was addressed by the right persons. So people
well,
can feel, you know, satisfied.
Well, as we've discussed earlier, information and how information is shared has changed.
Mm-hmm.
The whole modus operandi of being able to simply respond in measure and be believed, that has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so now people are basically having to make a decision of whether you just simply let people say what they will say and carry on course, or to get into a public spat trying to match information with information.
Okay, we have 4 more minutes. So caller, you're live. You have 1 minute.
1 minute.
One,
Oh.
probably less than that now. After you say,
Oh,
oh,
well, maybe better that's my question again because
Please,
I was
please.
going to
go
make
ahead.
reference to an article in the Dominican News Online on February 22nd, 2010, where it says for the heading, Raphael says economic citizenship program loan is cloaked with secrecy. So, in 2010, Mr. Raphael had concerns about the economic citizenship program. So, I would like to ask him, has that secrecy disappeared, vanished? And now we shouldn't have any problem if people have queries or concerns, because once upon a time, he had his queries and his concerns. Okay?
Thank you,
So, that's
caller.
all I can say for now. Are you
Thank you
Thank
so
ready?
you,
much.
caller. Thank you.
Good
Good
question,
question.
man.
Good
As I
question.
said before, people have the right as to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And ma'am, I am not opposed to anyone asking any question to the relevant persons. In 2010, she said, spoke about the
Secrecy.
secrecy in the loans. That's what she said.
Mm-hmm.
There was a loan situation that I was in with the government. I think it has been maybe addressed on this program, maybe not. The government took the company that I was representing to court.
Mm-hmm.
It was the matter was dismissed in court, and there is an order that came out in 2017. So for 7 years, the government battled this thing in court. It's just not my company, but all the companies that receive loans under the revised economic citizenship program. So from 1996 to 2000, there were 5 loans given, and the court dealt with it from 2010 to 2017. There's an order dismissing that from 2017. Somehow it still appeared in the budget for 2019
Director of
in
Audit.
the auditor's report. Since then, it's been clarified it should not have been in that report because somehow the information wasn't translated there, and that was,
Do you
as far
still
as I'm concerned, that's the end of that.
okay? So do you
So it's
still have
resolved in
issues?
the no, because if
Do you
it's a
still
court
have
order
okay?
that dismiss it, then it's nothing I can do,
So you
nothing the
have no
government can
concerns with the
do.
secrecy in terms of the loans. No, you don't have any more
Louis, it's a whole
concerns.
different time, a whole different
Okay.
issue. But I do say I don't object to people
Mm-hmm.
that raise questions. You never hear Sam go out and say, well, so and so shouldn't be asking about that, or that's none of their business. They shouldn't be asking that. Not at all. You have a right to ask. But my whole concern is you shouldn't be answering your question before you ask it. You shouldn't be saying X amount of money is stolen, X amount of money is missing before you ask the question. You have a right to ask. You don't have a right to make up an answer.
Okay, guys, we have 1 more minute, and we would like, of course, to play the address by His Excellency Charles Sabra. So we're going to close off the show now. It was great. I think it was very exciting tonight. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Sam. All right. And we're going to leave you guys here on the other side with the address to the nation by His Excellency Charles Sabra. Have a good evening.
My fellow citizens at home and abroad, and residents of Dominica, Merry Christmas to you. Notwithstanding the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic is now in its second year, we remain thankful as ever to God's promise to send a Messiah into the world to bring hope, peace, joy, love, and light, and to save his people. My wife, Clara, and the family join me in this second pandemic holiday season to extend to you and your households our warmest wishes for a blessed Christmas and a healthier, safer, better, and brighter New Year. This Christmas, like last year's, has to be celebrated differently for a second year in a row, as we are experiencing an even greater presence of active COVID-19 cases than was the case in December 2020. We were all hoping that the pandemic would have vanished by now and life would have returned to normal, allowing the Christian community to prepare in the traditional way for the celebration of the anniversary of the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, and the Prince of Peace. But as the scripture tells us, God's ways are not man's ways. Things do not always work out as planned or envisaged by man. However, even if things did not happen as we would have liked, we have to keep trusting God, for he is faithful and knows what is best for his people. After another difficult and challenging year of much anxiety, loss, and sacrifice, due to the far-reaching impact associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are again required to celebrate Christmas by limiting gatherings to our households, by continuing to observe all aspects of the COVID-19 health and safety protocols, to exercise great restraint and caution, and most importantly, to take the vaccine to help curb the spread of this exponentially surging coronavirus disease. We are required to do this for our own safety and that of our friends and loved ones. Despite this health and safety requirement, we were able last year, with the aid of digital technologies, to devise creative ways to safely celebrate the birth of the Christ child with our friends and loved ones, and we can do so even better this year. Moreover, if we understand the true meaning of Christmas, our celebration of Christmas should not be dampened by COVID. The Christmas story is a heartwarming reminder of the true reason for the season, to commemorate the birth of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Towards the end of the year, December 18, 2020 to be exact, we had recorded a total of 92 confirmed COVID-19 cases with 84 recoveries, 8 active cases, no COVID-19 related deaths, and no community spread. We are further grateful and thankful to God for the discovery of 3 viable vaccines thus far, the Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, one of which, the Pfizer, had been FDA approved and was already being administered in the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States of America. Early in 2021, in February of that year, we launched our vaccination campaign with 70,000 doses of AstraZeneca, which was donated by the government of India. AstraZeneca had received a provisional approval for emergency use. owing to a second wave of infections which began in August of 2021, involving the very infectious and transmissible Delta variant, as of the second week in December 2021, we have recorded a total of 6,208 confirmed COVID-19 cases, with 5,768 recoveries, 398 active cases, 32 new cases on average per day, and 42 deaths. Today, we have three types of vaccines at our disposal on island, namely the AstraZeneca, Sinopharm, and Pfizer, with the Moderna soon to be added to that list. We have, as of the 20th of December 2021, commenced the rollout of a booster shot program, which has become more urgent in light of the new Omicron variant that is already triggering a new surge in global infections. It is encouraging to note that the rate of daily infections in Dominica is trending downwards. However, daily infections, even in the 20s, is still much too high for a small country like ours. We need to work towards reducing the daily average of new cases to single digits and preferably to zero by ensuring that all of us get vaccinated. Currently, a total of 27,150 persons out of a target population of 52,281 are vaccinated. We are still a long way from attaining the level of vaccination to achieve herd immunity, the only way of returning to a semblance of normality. I therefore urge all those who have not yet taken the vaccine, particularly first responders and caregivers to the elderly, to come forward and get vaccinated. There is no denying the fact that this year has been very challenging for all of us, yet we cling to hope and have come through wiser and stronger to face the challenges of the year ahead. We are told in the good book that God's chosen people, the Israelites, did not believe that their salvation was at hand and that they would be delivered from slavery in the land of Egypt. But God never abandoned his people. He kept and fulfilled his promise in his own time, and the people of Israel journeyed through the wilderness until they reached the promised land. So just as he did in delivering his people from Egypt, he will continue to work on our behalf to deliver us from the scourge of this virus. But we must help ourselves and take the vaccine, including the booster shot, when available. Amidst all of the challenges, hurt, anxiety, worry, and fear that the pandemic has brought, there are also moments of great achievement for which we are to be thankful. Firstly, our government was able to put in place an effective national response to this pandemic that leaves no one behind or unprovided for. Secondly, we've managed to continue our economic thrust that have unfolded and executed in the areas of housing, health, education, agriculture, infrastructural development, and tourism, and the many windows of opportunities to be derived from such transformative initiatives as green energy, which is centered on our geothermal development program. We've also commenced the construction of the international airport and witnessed the commencement of operations on the 8th of December 2021. Energy, which is centered on our geothermal development program. We've also commenced the construction of the international airport and witnessed the commencement of operations on the 8th of December 2021.
That was His Excellency Charles Sanfra. We want to wish you guys season's greetings and happy New Year from all of us here on the other side. And let's try and be good to Sam, Gosh, next year. Let's try. Let's try to be good to Sam next year.
Amen. Happy New Year, everyone.
See you guys.